Are you DTFF?
Again, here's Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your host, Jake Trowbridge and Dustin Lunt.
Welcome back to DTFF, everyone. Happy Tuesday evening from Smoky Madison, Wisconsin. Bad weather here, but that will not stop us from having the show. We are quasi-professionals here. We would not let something like that happen. We've got a great show this evening. As you can see, we've got another guest joining us here, helping us with our final division of our breakdown series here, talking AFC West this evening. Nate, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you guys. I mean, I would love to say the save the best for last, but I think we all know that that's a little out there. So we'll say save the maybe not the worst for last. How's that sound?
I don't know about that, Dave, because if my eyes don't deceive me, I believe that the team that you are on here representing just so happened to be the best team in the NFL last year. Am I crazy?
I believe from the last thing I remember of that fateful day, we did win.
Audio listeners, we are, of course, talking about the Denver Broncos, who Nate is on here representing. No, but we will talk about the Broncos as well. Of course, Nate's representing the Chiefs, and we're going to have a lot to talk about for the Chiefs, I suspect.
I suspect as well. So, Nate, before we get going here, how did you become a fan of the Chiefs?
So proximity is probably the first start. I would love to say I had some origin story that takes me back to a different area, and I ran into a player and they let me play catch with them, and it was great. But nope, it really wasn't. There was only one. Actually, I take that back. There was a little piece when I was like 13 or 14 years old. My grandpa got to play a lot of golf with Marcus Allen, and him and Marcus Allen were in multiple different tournaments. And I have more Marcus Allen autographs than probably anybody else, to the point where I knew his autograph so well by the time I was 15, I could almost like the expert, like, well, no, his M has a little more of a tilde there. This is a forgery, which everybody trusts 14-year-olds when it comes to autograph. What is that?
Of course.
Guaranteeing. But yeah, so and St. Louis, where I'm at, we had a football team when I was real little, the Cardinals. They moved. So Then I became a football fan in general of every team because you didn't have one. And then the Rams came in, and they were fun for a couple of years. And then they left. But the whole time I was like, I had an AFC and an NFC team, but I always leaned AFC. Now I lean entirely because the Rams are dead to me.
Strong words. They left you. You are not ready for forgiveness. Maybe down the road. Maybe that's future Nate. No, just okay.
I didn't even leave like a shirt at their house to say, hey, did I get my Scott Fishbowl shirt at your house? Nothing. Gone. Dead. Phone number is gone from my phone.
I like to think I would be the same if my beloved Packers ever left the state, that I would be like, nope, fucking cut them out. Just
that's
done.
fine. I know. Maybe we can have Matt Stafford show up outside of your window with a boombox. We'll pretend it's raining. We'll see if he can get you back on board there someday. But hey, I like your Chief story. I mean, that's actually, you were writing it off like this was some, hubbity bubbity any man's story. That's a pretty cool ass story. I don't have that type of thing. I became a fan of the Packers because we moved to Wisconsin and I wanted to fit in. That's it. That's the end of the story, man. So I think yours is pretty damn rad.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah. Let's go through. Nate, what are you drinking this evening?
I have a Michelob Golden Light, the limited edition, by the way. So if anybody listening wants to purchase said can when I'm done drinking it, you can reach me on eBay at Jake Trowbridge. eBay. 25% of all sales will go to the Drinking and Talking Fantasy podcast to help promotion. You're welcome, everybody. Yes. We'll work on negotiations there later. But yeah, it's the Lake can. It's a Anheuser-Busch product since I'm here in St. Louis, and it's pretty nice.
Nice. You've got the Busch can. You've got the Busch Scott Fishbowl shirt on. You are representing fantastically.
An alcoholic. Yeah, exactly.
Dustin, I'm very curious about what you're drinking because I've seen little blips of it here. And this is a first, I think, for the show. Why don't you tell the folks what you're drinking on this show today?
I've gone basic this evening. I'm just drinking Truly's. This is the citrus punch.
We did
running
it.
low on beer. Running low
We
on
did
beer.
it,
and was what was
everybody. We
cold in the
took him down a
fridge.
peg. It's happened. Dustin is one of us now. The snobbiness is gone for the Trulies. What flavor of Truly are you talking right now?
Citrus punch.
Fruit punch?
Citrus.
Oh.
Citrus punch.
Okay. To my credit, is citrus not a fruit? I think citrus is a fruit. So I think technically your guy here still won that one.
If they wanted it called fruit punch, I think they would call it fruit punch. Nuts.
Well, look, I'm going to write a strongly worded letter to Truly to sort this whole thing out for us. But for right now, I'm not drinking a Truly. I kind of wish I was. Both of you have such fun can art.
Yeah.
I don't. This is just a steel can right here. An untampered no-namer, a no logo from the wife's workplace at Delta Beer Lab. I have a nice little amber, and it's very refreshing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I like that.
Me too.
Okay. Jake, do you want to hit us with our drunk trade now before we get into the meat of this episode?
Yes, please.
Drunk, hammered drunk.
Well, not sure why that cut off short,
not.
but go ahead, Jake.
God, let's just do it for the love of God. I don't know. Let's move past whatever the hell that was. Let's get into our drunk trade of the week. Here, I'll do it. Drunk trade of the week. This one comes to us from Reddit. Where else these days? From Reddit user W Marchino. I did a 3-team trade while at the bar, and it worked out great. IMO. That stands for in my opinion for all you non-sophisticants.
Thank you.
Of shortened language these days. You're welcome. They sent away Cam Akers, Trevor Lawrence, J-Mo Williams, Greg Dulcich, and a 2025 third. They got back CMC, Tua Tagovailoa, Daniel Bellinger, a 2024 second, and a 2025 second. A lot of pieces here. They say this is a 1 QB league. I already have Burrow. To be fair, my 2 trade partners were sitting at the bar with me, and we were all drunk, obviously. Thank you for sticking to the letter of the segment. So, gentlemen, there's actually a lot going on here. I don't want to presume that one side actually comes out ahead in this. I mean, I have my favorite here. I think a lot of people do, but I just want to test the consensus here. What side are you rocking with here? Who do you think the drunk one really was, Nate? What do you prefer?
I'm always a fan of going with the best player in the trade involved whatsoever. And that tip for me, of course, that would be CMC. That being said, I feel like the diversive one, especially reading a little bit today, is Jameson Williams, of where people stand on Jameson, because what we haven't seen is the upside of that elite, wide receiver one that I think some people were expecting. I personally, like I said, I like the CMC side. I can understand if you're taking the other angle, but Dustin?
Yeah, I prefer the CMC side as well. Love CMC, especially if you are competing or if you're going to be competing for that championship this year, you really feel like you have a solid team. Yeah, CMC is the piece to have for probably this year and next year. Tua, good backup to Burrow. There's probably going to be weeks where you might want to start him over Burrow, depending on the matchup, depending on how he plays. Bellinger, I really was all gung-ho on him until Waller came into the Giants this offseason. But nice piece to have in Dynasty. So stash on your bench for a while. And then you're getting 2 seconds out of the deal as well. So, I like that CMC side by quite a bit, actually.
Me too. And that's always, that always worries me when it's like, which side do you like? Because you never want to be the lone wolf on the other side and have to make an argument, especially for a trade that involves so many pieces where, like, I like Dulcich over Bellinger. I like, I like CMC over Akers. I don't know. I'm glad that we're in agreement, so we don't have to fight this out.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see, since it was a three-way trade, to
Oh,
know
yeah.
like what the actual like who received what pieces, or which how it all broke down as saying it was a three-way. Just knowing that he got all that back and what he had to give up, and what kind of that third party piece was to give up, what pieces were given up there as well.
That's
Uh,
true.
but regardless, I do like how he finished off that trade there. That was nice.
Agreed.
I agree with him that it did work out.
Which, when you're drunk, you never know. I mean,
Yeah.
everything has, even beer trade goggles are on at that time, and can sound very, especially when you are getting the best player. Usually that's when you get duped, because they're like,
Yeah.
there's CMC and garbage, and you're giving up
Yep.
everything, and you get wowed. But yeah, to win now and get 2 better draft picks in the future seems like a kind of a double dip.
Yeah, absolutely. Hooray for us.
Yeah.
In agreement. All right. Looks like Jake is having some internet issues here, but we will forage on. Let's get right into the main event here. For those of you out there that haven't been following along with us, I'll go through each team, notable losses, additions via free agency or trades, and then what they did fantasy relevant in the draft. And then we will wax poetically about each team here. Yeah. So we're going to start with the Broncos just because they are first on the show sheet, but we're last in the division last year at 5-12. They lost in this offseason Mike Boone, Latavius Murray, Chase Edwards, Melvin Gordon, and Marlon Mack. Whole lot of running backs there. They brought on board Samaje Perine, Tony Jones, Marquez Callaway, Jared Stidham, and Chris Manhertz. And in the draft, in the second, Marvin Mims Jr. So Nate, why don't you start us off here? What are you feeling about these Broncos? Just as kind of a overview, do you like some of the moves they made here this offseason? What are you expecting, for the upcoming season here?
Yeah, the biggest needle mover is probably a addition that wasn't mentioned, which was Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi. I think the offensive firepower, getting rid of Nathaniel Hackett, maybe that's addition by subtraction, could possibly be good. It's hard to believe that they're going to be worse than 5-12. I just, last year at this time, everybody, at least I was, and maybe you were doing the same, everyone was talking about the AFC West and how who's gonna win.
Yep.
Denver should have been so much better. Kansas City, of course, might be worse because they lost Tyreek. Vegas should be better. LA, or San Diego, whatever you want to call them, still I'll call them both. But we'll say the Chargers should be better. But I would like to believe, as a whole, they are going to improve. I mean, that's probably the most safe bet you could make.
Yeah, I agree. It was kind of a shit show last year with who was it? Nathaniel Hackett was their first time in, former Packer coach. It's too bad to see him struggle, but I mean, we saw those last couple weeks of the season once he was out of there that the team started to perform more of like what we would have expected. Now, was that just a function of, hey, it's the end of the season, we're kind of auditioning for a new coach who's coming in, or was it truly just that broken of an offense and pretty much anything they threw in was going to be better? We don't know. But speaking of Sean Payton coming in and Russ Wilson, the connection there with Breeze and Peyton and how well they work together. Do you think Peyton's going to bring some magic back to Russ and he's going to be a little bit more fantasy relevant than he's been the last couple of years?
I think so. I don't want to go in and shoot the moon for Russ, because the question then is it going to be a product of Russell Wilson that first year where he lost his mental health coach? And I know that losing a friend, personal outside the hash mark situation, can affect you. There's no doubt about that. New team, new situation. But maybe it's just that he's regressing because he's in his 30s and the age is starting to catch up and the wear and tear. But I will say that regardless of who it is, I think Sean Payton is probably going to be the best thing for him, just from an offensive play calling standpoint, that mixture of him and Joe Lombardi. But one of the things is career low touchdown rate, I think it was 3.3% last year. If he just regresses back to the mean, just to his normal, he would have added 12 touchdowns to last year's total. just
Totally
be an
different story.
average, right? I mean, absolutely. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. We still might. We had to have some conversation, but it might not be, the Mr. Unlimited and everything else wouldn't have been quite the joke that it is by
Right.
comparison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess realistically, since we're mostly a redraft focused show here, is he, if you're punting quarterback and going for more of a late round QB, is he someone you'd be interested in as taking like as your first quarterback, kind of as one of those QBs outside the top 12, maybe?
I think that it's worth the investment. I like taking him as my second if I'm going to go up, like if I'm going to take I don't want to go total risk. Like it's not the Anthony Richardson taking him and then Kirk Cousins where you get the safety and then the upside. Russ is in that weird spot where if you take him as your one and he has 12 more touchdowns and just goes back to his norm, he's got the weapons, right? But I still think I don't know if I'm still trusting him to be my one. I would rather probably pivot to the aforementioned like Cousins or one of those other names that's going similar in that range.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I just don't know that he has the upside
Right.
to really crack into the top 12 anymore. And like I said, they have great weapons there. I don't know. I guess I've lost faith in Russ and his talent, as we like to joke here on this podcast. Yeah, I just don't know that I trust it at this point of his career to really have a rebound, where he becomes super fantasy relevant.
Yeah, earlier, Jake said have Matthew Stafford stand out front of my house. I trust Matthew Stafford rebound twice as much as I trust Russ.
Yeah,
would you rather
absolutely.
have Goff or Russell Wilson?
Oh, give me Goff.
Same here.
Jake, since you're back.
They allowed me back on just in time to hype up Russell Danger Wilson. I would rather take the floor of Jared Goff so I can appreciate and understand what you have there. Russell Wilson, I think, has a higher ceiling with Sean Payton. That's what I would say.
I don't think that's unfair.
Yeah. All right. Then let's move into this backfield here. I mean, they lost a bunch of nobodies in that backfield. No offense to any of those running backs because they could kill me pretty easily, I'm sure. But Javonte went out with that ACL. Not sure if he's going to be back to start the season. We don't know how healthy he really is. They brought in Samaje Perine, which in limited action last year looked really good in place of Mixon. So I guess what are your thoughts for Javonte in this backfield? Do you expect him to start week one? And if so, what kind of production do you expect?
I don't expect him to be back week one. I'm far from a medical professional, but you stopped at just saying ACL when he had two other ligaments that were torn as well. And that tri-ligament injury, the recovery is so much harder than a single. Not that I'm discrediting just those little sissy ACL only injuries. You guys got it made. But what's crazy is on May 13th, Sean Payton's like, start a season. And then he joins practice on the 25th of May. So the timeline keeps getting moved up. I would bet 12 Golden Light cans at the retail value of this limited edition, by the way, that he does not start week one. But I don't know if they'll put him on the pup. That's where I think that's the thing to pay attention to, right? We have to, because that's an immediate guarantee. We know he's out, and Samaje Perine is, to the moon or whatever everybody's saying nowadays.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't expect him to be starting week one either. And even if he was, I'm going to be honest, where I've seen him going in mock drafts lately, I am staying away from him at that ADP. I just can't get on board. I don't trust it whatsoever. And as we were saying with kind of these wide receivers and the other weapons on this offense, it's not like they have to rely on the run game. They've got a good offensive line and they've got, good receiving options. So, that's even more reason that I'm kind of more hesitant and probably wouldn't be drafting him at his current ADP.
In best ball, I can get on board with it a little bit more. In best ball with Javonte Williams, the hope is volume enough. By the time the end of the season starts to roll around, he becomes valuable enough where he kind of has a Cam Akers run, like maybe at the end of last season, something like that. But in redraft, I'm with you. I'm staying away. I like P. Ryan. Sean Payton likes P. Ryan. He said so, and that was kind of his way to get him in the building, was like, look at how I use these other running backs. And maybe it's just a selling point to get some depth on the team. But Dustin, you mentioned it. They let go of a ton of guys. I know they're just guys, but every running back from last year's gone. So I do think P. Ryan's worth checking out.
Yeah, where he's going too. I mean, realistically, he's sandwiched currently around the likes of Damian Harris, Elijah Mitchell, Zach Charbonnet, and those names. I love the idea of taking P. Ryan late enough to offset, like if you happen to draft someone like Breece Hall or a person Tony Pollard, who's starting the season off a little banged up. You need that first 4 or 5 weeks of reprieve as your 2 in that case. And then if Javonte comes back, you don't have to worry about a workload that's most likely unattainable for Samaje. Because, I mean, the most attempts he's had in the season is 95, I guess, dating back 5-6 years or however long it's been. So not a workload back, I don't think, but doable.
Yeah, and I think P. Ryan will still have usable weeks once Javonte comes back. They're going to want to ease him in, and he'll be a part of the pass game too. So, yeah, I think he's a good later round target as well. And then let's finish up our Broncos conversation here, talking about the tight end Greg Dulcich. Is he a good late round target if you're punting the tight end position? Is he someone that you like, that you think has a decent floor week to week?
Yeah, I mean, hell, he averaged 40 plus yards per game last year. His biggest, the biggest thing he brings is the fact that he's that explosive tight end, the more big play, more so than just catch and prod for 4 yards. Remember 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, probably up to the past 10, 12 years ago, every tight end outside the top 2 or 3, you knew it was going to be 4 receptions, 44 yards, move on. You hope that he catches the touchdown. I think that Dulcich can provide more. I mean, he had last year in limited time, realistically, he had the 7th most 30-plus yard gain, so big playability there. Combine that with Peyton, I think you have a little bit higher ceiling. He'll go missing at times. I don't doubt that, but I don't doubt that with any tight end. So, yeah, I found he is kind of that ideal. You punt tight end, you grab him. He's comfortable enough that that in the AFC West there should be trailing, so there's going to be plenty run or pass heavy where he won't be trying to keep blocking. And I'm not worried about Adam Troutman, not worried about Albert O or any of those other names. So I think he's probably the guy, double-digit scoring in half of his games. So yeah, color me interested.
Nice. I like that. Any final thoughts about the Broncos before we move on?
Broncos suck. Go Chiefs.
All right. We're going to jump over the Chiefs. I know they're next on the show sheet here, but we're going to save them for last. Best for last, since they are the reigning champions of the league. So we will jump next then to the Raiders, who finished 3rd in the division at 6-11. They lost Derek Carr, Darren Waller, Foster Moreau, Mac Hollins, and Jarrett Stidham. They brought on board Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Myers, Brian Hoyer, Austin Hooper, and OJ Howard. And via the draft in the 2nd, they took Michael Mayer at tight end. In the 3rd, Trey Tucker, wide receiver. And in 4th, Aidan O'Connell at quarterback. So I don't know what to think about this Raiders team. Jimmy G versus Derek Carr, it's kind of like, okay, that's a wash in my book. If that, I mean, I'm probably a little bit higher on Derek Carr than most people, but it's not an upgrade, I don't feel like, at the quarterback position. You got Devontae Adams there, who's still a stud, will be for the next couple years. He's guaranteed fantasy gold. Wherever you're able to get him, take him. The tight end position will be interesting. I don't know. It's, you got Jacobs, who's going to be a workhorse. Let's start there. I think where he's going, he is an extreme value right now. Because he's on that franchise tag, and I think they are going to just run him and work him into the ground and then let him go after the season. And I think it's criminal. I think he's going as running back 10 right now. And I will take that all day long. How do you feel about that?
I think that the value is for sure there. I think the biggest concern people have is when they're looking at that spot and they're making that decision between Jacobs and say, probably Tony Pollard, Ramondre's in that same range. That 340 carry workload he had last year is a little concerning for everybody, rightfully so. Any running back that ever had that much work the second year, the next year, they have underperformed. But I would also say that any of those people that have done so probably aren't drafted as the RB10 the following year. They're probably the RB2 or 3, and there's disappointment in that. You're drafting him to be, if he finishes, I don't know, 5 spots lower than where he's being drafted, you're still getting a decent enough value. I think he's going to be exactly like you said, worked it, just running to the ground. Jimmy G's not going to spread the ball too deep, so they're going to be short to intermediate. I think he can see that workload in the receiving game as well. I don't find myself getting a ton of them, though, as of yet in any leagues. But maybe after tonight, maybe I'll change that. Maybe you have persuaded me to go the Josh Jacobs route. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. In that range he's falling, right around Ramondre. I mean, typically I've been taking Ramondre in my mock drafts before Jacobs. But that's just because Ramondre has been there. Had he not been there, I would have taken Jacobs and I would have felt just fine about it. Then I just lean a little bit heavier towards Ramondre this season. But I think he's going to be one of the safest running backs you could have, obviously barring injury this year, because I think that volume is going to be there, and there's not a whole lot of competition behind him.
Oh, is there any competition behind him realistically? I mean, what is it? Zamir White is probably the
There's some truthers out there.
I'm sure there are. Yep. Those truthers are just waiting for that 340 rush attempt plateau to break him and him be out, and then trust in that. I wouldn't myself, but hey, you know what? You got to take somebody at around the RB 60 range. Might as well be Zamir White, right?
Yeah. Why not?
Why not?
So I know I kind of brought this up in my intro to the Raiders, and I really didn't think that Jimmy G is an upgrade over Derek Carr. Do you think he is, or is he just same guy essentially?
I mean, I think it's good. So people that might not, we have kind of a working sheet just so, so Nate doesn't come in blind. And I love the way this phrase is, if Jimmy G plays, is he an upgrade? And the fact that the first 4 words are if Jimmy G plays, because
he's got that injury.
I don't disagree, man. I am right there with you. And that to me he's already behind Carr. I mean, I don't think the big play threat out of Jimmy G is quite there. I know 2019. Oh, look at how he had a good season in 2019. I get it. But yeah, it is also probably a lateral move too. I'm not saying it's a regressive move, but yeah, if Jimmy G plays, I'm bypassing probably both of those 2 quarterbacks. Scott Fishbowl last year, Derek Carr was big because of the efficiency, and everybody thought, oh, here's a 70% completion, and he, shat the bed there. I don't see the efficiency, despite the, Josh McDaniels, and I'm probably out on Jimmy G.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, outside of Adams and Jacobs, I'm probably staying away from most of the other pieces here. The only other one I might take a late flyer on is with the tight end position. And a lot of tight end talk on this podcast so far, which is odd for us. But with Michael Mayer, and I don't know how much rookie analysis you do. Are you big on?
I will say that I don't do nearly enough. I fake it till I make it. I know enough about the situation, and I know he can be supportive. And there's not a ton. I mean, with both Waller and Foster Moreau out, the pathway to snaps are there, and I think the short to intermediate thing is a good opportunity.
Yeah, Austin Hooper does not worry me.
No, me either.
So I guess coming into the rookie draft this year, I know Kincaid typically going in that like 108 to 110 range in your rookie drafts. I personally was out on him at that price. I would have waited and taken like Mayer or Laporta in the second. Is
Same.
that something you would have done as well? And do you think Mayer could be the best tight end out of this class? Because I know there's been a lot of talk about how great this tight end class is or could be.
I think that as this year or going forward, I think we might have the same answer. I think it could be yes to both, because there was not too long ago that Mayer was the number one prospect at tight end, and it was slam dunk. And that was the beginning of the season. Really, Mayer did nothing to ruin that. But Kincaid, landing spot, athletic prowess, ability to play in the slot, everything kind of pushed him up a little bit. He lands in Buffalo, and I get it. The landing spot by many is like, that's perfect. But I wasn't as sold on that personally myself. I think the hype of him being in the slot, all the room, the talk, and he may actually start there. There's no doubt in my mind that he could. The weapons aren't exactly overflowing in Buffalo. They have enough. But I was all aboard, waiting, taking Mayer in Vegas. I have no problem with Sam Laporta either, especially early until Jameson Williams returns. But I like what Mayer brings, and I think that that fits that offense better than on a surefire like floor. I mean, I think that each week we're going to get that. That does lead me to one other person on the team that I think that kind of goes along with the same line of thinking with Jacoby Myers. I think he could see an increased workload this year just based on the fact that Jimmy G's normal patterns are underneath and short to intermediate. Not a game breaker, because it's still going to be Devontae Adams.
Right. Yeah, I think that's interesting. And just one other point with Mayer, getting back to him for just a second. The one thing that gives me hope with him as well is that Jimmy G did focus or funnel a lot of targets to Kittle. And I know Kittle's a beast, and he's probably a whole different level of elite tight end. But the fact that he did support Kittle so well gives me hope that maybe he'll look for the tight end here in this offense as well.
Yeah, and it's not like Josh McDaniels was opposed to going to the tight end route. I think that all those years in New England, they had not, obviously they had Gronk, but they were comfortable with going Aaron Hernandez and Gronk, and the incorporation of that mindset into Josh McDaniels could very easily go in this year. Like you said, that 2019 season with Kittle had 1,000 yards and 100 plus targets. And what do you have? 10 touchdowns that year, 5 touchdowns. My apologies. Half is wrong, but yeah, no, I'm right there with you.
Yeah. And Jake jumping in, apparently his internet is not doing so well, but he has some foolproof tight end advice. If only, Jake, get your ass back on the show here, and you can share all that wisdom with us. So anyone else you want to talk about here on the Raiders, or any other thoughts? I mean, I do think that they're going to finish last in this division this year. I just don't see a lot of upside with them. I just don't.
No, and I don't. And I mean, I know we're not talking the defensive side of the ball, but that goes into it as well.
Absolutely.
And they're lacking. I mean, they have a great pass rush. There's no doubt about that. But the linebacking and the secondary leaves a lot to be desired. And in the AFC West, if you can't slow down opposing teams, you're going to be playing from behind quite a bit. And I don't know if they have the firepower to keep up with that, especially with an offensive line that's just not that great.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. All right, then let's move over to the Chargers. Then they finished second in the division at 10-7. Notable losses: DeAndre Carter, I guess, use air quotes there. No real additions of note for this offseason. And in the draft, they took Quentin Johnson, in the first, wide receiver. In the fourth, another wide receiver is Darius Davis. And in the seventh, Max Duggan at QB. So why don't you start us off here in your thoughts about these Chargers?
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The Chargers, I will say, are the biggest fear for me in the West. Clearly, on both sides of the ball, you start with on the defense, and they've got all the pieces to slow down all the opposing offenses. But from a fantasy perspective, the good news is that they are going to be tasked with, keeping pace, and that is gonna Justin Herbert going on down the line. Every position they has, in my eyes, at least a top 12 at that spot, maybe top 15, top 20 if we want to extend the wide receiver, except for tight end. And that's not a knock against Gerald Everett, but it's a knock against the fact that Gerald Everett just at tight end, I have to find some weakness if I'm going to do so. I think offensively they are as dangerous as anybody. The offensive line is grown together. The left side is fantastic. The right side could use a little work, but it starts with Herbert. And and I know the first question that you want to ask me is from Herbert having that down season last year,
quote unquote. Like, people thought it was a down year, and it was compared to his first couple seasons in the league, but he still had a fine season last year.
Absolutely. The biggest knock against Herbert and the Herbert owners from last year is that they can go back to about 4 games where he didn't throw a touchdown, and another handful, 5 or 6 games, where he only had 1. And those games are the things that stick in your mind. You don't remember the 3 touchdown, 350-yard performance, the 370-yard performance with, just happened to be rushing touchdowns within the 2-yard line, where he could have had a 367-3 game against Miami. All those games add up. The fact of the matter is he was just 200 yards short of a 5,000-yard season.
And people are disappointed in that.
Of course.
Of course. How do you see with Kellen Moore coming over from the Cowboys? How do you see him putting his stamp on this offense and maybe lifting Herbert up a little bit more?
I think that's the best addition that they've made. I love Quentin Johnson. Don't get me wrong, but I think that Kellen Moore is going to bring a little more. Oh, what's the right word? I don't want to say balanced offense, because that's not the case. I would say reliable, consistent offense. I think we've seen. I think that it pushes up all the receivers. It pushes up everybody on the offense. And it's hard to imagine. I don't think the yardage changes per se, but I think the work around the red zone and just the overall touchdown efficiency does improve. And we'll see. I think that Herbert is probably my QB 5, 6 on season, depending upon how much you value some of the rushing upside from some of the others.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. Jake?
I only have about 30 seconds, I think, before they boot me back out. So let me say this very important thing. What's the one thing Kellen Moore brings to this team? In a word, balls. Great big balls that I think are needed and are going to be missing from Dallas. I think this is going to be an interesting scenario where people are going to be drafting Justin Herbert much closer to his floor for once, which we haven't had an opportunity to do as value drafters. Like, we haven't been able to get Herbert as a value ever. So I'm hoping that, if he's being drafted around Trevor Lawrence, zero disrespect to Trevor Lawrence, but I will take Justin Herbert every time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited. I think he is going to rebound, and I think that is a great point, Jake, that there is a little bit of a discount, especially in redraft. There's going to be that discount this year, and if you're able to snag him a little bit later and still have that upside, I love that. All right, moving on. So, Nate, as you said, with Kellen Moore coming on board, it kind of raises all fantasy assets here. So let's do a little would you rather, who'd you rather, at ADP this is current ADP going into redraft season here. Would you rather have Keenan Allen, who is currently going as the wide receiver 17 or 33rd overall, or Mike Williams at wide receiver 26 and 46th overall? So you're looking at about a round and a half, little over a round difference in their draft
Mm-hmm.
So who would you rather have and why?
I say so. Both injury risks negate each other, so that's out. Since we both know that that's a possibility. Hate talking about injuries, but it is what it is. The one I would say I'm going to take Keenan Allen more times than not, simply because if there's a case to be made that Quentin Johnson actually does come in and deliver first round value, it's going to be at the disposal most likely of Mike Williams. And I still think that Herbert to Allen will still they'll move the chains, all the intermediate. He'll be a PPR monster. And like if this was a standard league and we were Neanderthals playing in this league back in 1945, then yeah, I'm taking Mike Williams all day because, I'd have to mail the ballot to you. We wouldn't be doing this. We would be send my messenger pigeon to Jake's house, and it would. Well, if it's based on the internet, it would probably die before it got there, slam into the window, and we would have dead pigeons. Dead Pigeon Society, I'm sorry. This is the thoughts and views of Nate Markham do not represent the thoughts of either Dustin and or Jake. So
except for that last one. That last one does. That represents all.
Screw you, pigeons. We hate you all. Only carrier pigeons, not all pigeons.
I do think you're talking about the PPR portion of that with Keenan Allen. It's interesting to me that he is such a catch machine, obviously, and that's what he's been utilized as. He's our generation's Larry Fitzgerald, I guess. I don't know, but it's like in full PPR. I think he's actually being for once drafted kind of where I think he should be. Speaking about value, I kind of missed the days last year. It felt like you could get Keenan Allen a round and a half later than you can right now. So maybe the rest of everyone else is catching up, or maybe they are putting the Kellen Moore effect on the receivers more than the quarterbacks, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement here with Keenan Allen. I mean, part of me is like he's kind of the floor play. I mean, he'll probably end up with more fantasy points come the end of the season than Mike Williams, but I mean, I don't feel like you're going to get those big boom games out of him where if you're looking for more of that ceiling play, I think Mike Williams is the way to go. So if you start like super wide receiver heavy in your draft and then take Mike Williams as like your third or fourth wide receiver as kind of that ceiling play that you can plug in good matchups, you think, he's going to give you that 30-point week or 40-point week, then sure. But yeah, it's kind of how you want to build your roster as far as ceiling versus floor play week to week.
Yeah. And that's a good point that I think a lot of people overlook is roster development and how much risk you want to put into your basket or how many floor plays, because a collection of floor plays doesn't pay out, and a collection of all ceiling plays is what we all say we want to do, and we all say it on the air. And I don't play for floor plays, I play for ceiling, I play to win. And then what happens? I'll probably take Keenan Allen. He's safe. I don't know what I trust. Terry McLaurin has Sam Howell. I'm not quite sure. I talk a big game, but I don't back it up sometimes.
God, it's like you're peering directly into my soul, Nate. That's kind of rude, honestly. I actually don't think Keenan Allen is just a floor play. I do think in this offense, he can be effective. I'm not saying get double-digit touchdowns, but I think he'll have higher ceilings than we've actually seen from him in the years past. I'm curious, talking about ceiling plays, talking about PPR, what's the effect going to be on Austin Ekeler here with this new offense? I don't know. That's the biggest question mark to me, is what the impact is to Austin Ekeler. Nate, do you think he'll maintain his sort of elite fantasy production in this new look offense?
Isn't that crazy? So what last year, again, going back to last year this time, last year a lot of the talk was Austin Ekeler himself saying, I probably won't get a lot of red zone touches. They're going to want to get someone else involved. Not sure they want me handling the entire workload. And he finished basically the RB1. So we know that what he said is sometimes a good running back is just a good running back regardless. And I think that we will see some of the targets reduce. I mean, I can't say that with definitive, but I don't see 100 target or 127 targets replicated. If he's closer to the 90 target like he was in 2021, or, I don't expect it. I mean, that's pretty much his pace because 2020 he had, in 10 games, 65 targets. So a 90 target floor is incredible. There's no doubt. No one's going to ever scoff at that. And I think that's a pretty safe play. And let's be honest, the offense, I don't know what percentage increase they're going to see, but like we said with Herbert, his concern was his touchdown percentage, and that was lower. And we have to assume some of those will go Austin Ekeler's direction in the passing game as well. I'm not concerned. I want to know if you two are concerned because I need to pay attention so I don't draft him as much or I draft him more. What will it be?
Yeah, I am personally not concerned with Austin Ekeler for this season for redraft. He's one of my top running backs, no doubt. Dynasty, he's obviously getting up there a little bit. Is this the last year on his contract with the Chargers? I believe so. Yeah. So, I mean, if he's a free agent, that worries me some. So I don't know long-term that I necessarily like it, but for this season, yeah, give me all the Ekeler.
Yeah, I'm going to be hard pressed to find a running back being drafted around him that I don't have some concerns about too. I think everybody's giving grace to Bijan Robinson and just assuming that he's elite and he's fantastic and take him 9 times out of 10 over Austin Ekeler. Okay, I can see the argument for it, but I also see some general concerns about an Arthur Smith offense that is anointing this guy right away. And so every running back, I think, in his range outside of like your CMCs is going to have a little bit of risk baked into it. That's why you draft him early, if you draft a running back early at all. So I think if you have concerns about Austin Ekeler, it's not just about Austin Ekeler. It's more about what your risk is in taking those guys in the early rounds. So for me, will I draft him? Yeah, maybe, maybe. But it's really going to depend if I can get him closer to, the early mid second than the late first, probably.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then one last thing real quick here. With Gerald Everett, the tight end, we saw with Kellen Moore and his offenses in Dallas that they did focus on the tight ends a fair amount. Mm-hmm. Do we see Gerald Everett becoming more fantasy relevant this year? I mean, I'm not expecting him to jump into that, top 5 tier, but could he be a low end tight end 1 at the end of the season? Question mark.
I think that you bringing up the usage in Dallas was pretty important because especially around the red zone, which is where we want to see the improvement, and they should spend plenty of times or spend plenty of time. Those words there. And last year, Dalton Schultz, and I'm not comparing Schultz to Gerald Everett, but tight end 1 to tight end 1, however you want to look at that, he was 5th in the NFL in red zone targets. Only caught 8 of them, 8 of the 16. But if he's wanting to design plays to go to the tight end in the red zone, and Gerald Everett being a big body, and that's an option. The thing is, they have so many big bodies. Mm-hmm. They have 13 feet of wide receivers on the outside. I don't know how accurate that is. I've said that number really fast, and I was like, "You're stupid, Nate. Why would you say 13?" And then I'm like, "Holy shit, they're actually 6 foot."
Just say it with confidence.
Yeah,
none of
exactly.
us would have batted an eye.
I was all on board with that.
Yeah, damn it! Stick with it, Nate. We're not live, right? Yeah, back this up. Yeah, redo. Take 2. Take 2. So yeah,
I think it's interesting that you brought up Dalton Schultz in general because I do think Gerald Everett. We saw more out of Gerald Everett than we saw from Dalton Schultz before Dalton Schultz became a thing last year. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's wild at all to assume that Everett could have a better fantasy year than even Dalton Schultz did last year. I wouldn't be shocked by that. I'm not outright saying that he will, but as we've said on this show 1,000 times, anybody outside of tight end 5 might as well be the same damn person. So I could see an argument for Gerald Everett being taken in that group of tight ends at least.
Mm-hmm. All right. I feel good about leaving that there for the Chargers. And as we totally planned when we started our whole divisional breakdown series, we're saving the Super Bowl champions for the very last team that we're going to discuss this offseason. So let's head it over to the Chiefs. They were 14-3, first in the division, first in Nate's heart. and first overall in the league as Super Bowl champions. All right. So in the offseason, they lost Mecole Hardman, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Ronald Jones. They brought on board Richie James, and in the draft, they drafted wide receiver Rashee Rice in the second round. So, Nate, the floor is yours to talk as much or as little as you'd like about your beloved Chiefs.
The Chiefs are a fantasy enigma outside of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Outside of that, I am at an utter loss. I don't know exactly what to do. And I know that's exactly why you brought me on. You're thinking, hey, we could have brought anybody on to talk about the Chiefs. We bring this dipshit that says he has no clue. But anybody that says they have a clue is a liar. And I'm talking to you, whoever said that. If you're listening and watching, you're a liar because I don't have a clue. Because if you told me last year that Mahomes was going to throw for 5,000 plus yards and he was going to have 1,000-yard receiver, I would have said that doesn't make sense. That can't math. That can't. It doesn't jive. And I would have been wrong. And then I would have been the idiot. And people would have mocked me on your show, and they would have pointed me out. And I don't want that. I want to be beloved by all. So I'm going to say, if it comes to Kansas City, from a fantasy perspective, there's a lot of things that could go right. There's a lot of concerns. The best part about it is, everybody outside of Mahomes and Kelce, it's baked into their ADP that no one knows what's going to happen. No one is hyperinflated for an offense that should lead the NFL in a lot of different categories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. By the way, I got to tell you, never worry about looking foolish when talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, because you're talking to a couple of gentlemen here who said, Travis Kelce in 2022, that's who you're going to spend a first round pick on? You fools. We said, and we laughed about it. And we look so smart in retrospect for talking about him that way. And this year, it's like almost as a safety blanket, you just go Kelce and nobody else. But to your point, like if somebody were to announce Justin Ross is going to lead this receiving core in yards in 2023, I'd be like, okay, sure, because anybody can at this point. Is there anybody at least that gets you tingling with the wide receivers? Anybody who you're like, man, I don't know who it is, but maybe it's this dude?
You said Justin Ross is the most exciting name for a person who, if he could get, thing is, I don't know what snap share. So right now they're projected to keep 7 wide receivers on their team, maybe 6 plus 1 for a practice squad. That 7th person right now is most likely Justin Ross. The 8th person is Amir Smith Marset. Another amazing name you didn't put on the list of recent. I'm kidding, by the way, that's terrible. All we know right now is that Sky Moore, MVS, and Kadarius Toney are the starters as of today. If the KC media that follows everything, nobody has said anything more about Justin Ross. And I don't know if that's keeping it quiet, if that's by design, because we all see what we want is big body, amazing, hyper athletic. Don't bring in DeAndre Hopkins. Let him be the new DeAndre Hopkins. Let him and Mahomes put up 1,000 plus. But there hasn't been any traction yet. And that worries me that he's going to need a great training camp. So if you get your chances to get him now, super late, last round, take him. Because if in training camp he does put on that show that we all kind of want to see, his value will skyrocket. I want Kadarius Toney to stay healthy. If there was a crystal ball, Dustin, get your crystal ball out. Do the actions. I want you to do the actions too. I don't have.
Well, you can't see me doing the actions, but
this is almost a family show.
Yeah, good Lord. All right, so he's rubbing his crystal ball, and what you see, nobody should see. It is that if you knew how one person's information is, I want to know if Kadarius Toney plays 15 games. If Kadarius Toney plays 15 games, I would 100% say that he would finish within the top 16 wide receiver this year. I think that would be my surefire. So if I could pick one, he gets me tingly, but unfortunately I think that's neuropathy and he's going to end up with 5 games played. It's just, it sucks.
Yeah. I mean, 50, if you would have said maybe like 13, I might have been a little bit more, but like, yeah, I think that's doable. I don't know though. I mean, like you said, he just hasn't shown it, and I hate to use the injury prone label on players. I'm hopeful he with kind of a new setting in KC, that hopefully they have better trainers and he can stay healthy. I'll believe it when I see it at this point. But I think you're right though. If he does stay healthy, I think he could be the steal of the draft. I mean, really this year. I mean, with just the amount of yards and points this offense is going to put up. And like you said, outside of Kelsey, they need to get someone else involved. Why not Tony? And if he's healthy, yeah, I think you're right. I think he could be the sneaky guy this year, and I really, really like that.
I brought a trivia question for you guys because I know that would be something. If you had to guess, number one, last year for the Chiefs, what was the highest snap percentage that any wide receiver played? With 100% obviously being the highest, 0% being the lowest.
Highest of anybody. If I had to guess of who it was, I'd say it's probably somebody like MVS, which is terrifying. And I'd say like 60.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Juju, and 83%.
Both. I love both of those because that is telling. Because no team that is this proficient should have guesses that are below at least one game where a wide receiver had 90%. It's ridiculous. That's crazy. The answer was actually higher. It was only in like 2 games that it was 88%. That person was Justin Watson.
Ugh, dear God.
Juju was like 87%, 87 something percent. But yeah, that is telling about this offense that at any given moment, there was only 2 weeks last year that 2 receivers played more than 80% of the snaps in the same given week. So they never line up wild. 2. So it's just this miscellaneous kind of hodgepodge.
They're trying to find something to work, basically, is what it tells us.
And they won a Super Bowl doing that. So does that mean they're going to change from that? I don't know.
Yeah. Like you said, unless someone really stands out and takes that step forward.
Justin Ross.
Maybe, or like you said, Tony stays healthy, or MVS learns how to catch the ball on a consistent basis. I don't know.
Out of all the things you said, out of all the things anybody said on this show, that's the most outlandish.
That is,
I know.
I'm out of here.
I had to throw one outlandish scenario out there, as guys that are intimately familiar with MVS and his ball catching ability.
Sadly are. So we don't know the wide receivers. We don't know what's happening there. Do we even pretend to know what's happening with the running backs then? Do you assume? I mean, I think most folks assume if nobody else signs with them, it's Isaiah Pacheco.
Is he a
workhorse?
Yeah, and they got rid of the roadblock of Ronald Jones, so we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But they still, where he's being drafted for a running back, again, the same narrative on a team that should score. Their offense was enough for the last half of the season to support 2 top 24 running backs between him and McKinnon. The problem is that I just don't trust Pacheco to stay on the field in passing down snaps. And I know somebody may say, well, what about against the Bengals? He had six receptions that game. That's optimistic. Yeah, it's optimism, but it's fake optimism that it's going to be Jerick McKinnon. They brought back CEH for a reason. It's because they do have a goal in mind, which is to just torment all of us that watched him get taken over. Jonathan Taylor, name DeAndre, so we could go on and on and on and on. But I just don't see him being used in the passing game enough. I think he's a stable. If he's your, like right now, what is he going around? RB 25, something like that. I think I don't have it pulled up, so I'm just guessing at this point.
He is RB 25, 86th overall.
Oh, okay. I'm okay with him as my RB 3 if that's where you would take him at, or 2 if you took super high upside. If you take, if you got Bijan or CMC or any of the other names, I'm okay. I just worry that we're expecting total workhorse and we're not going to get it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't see him being a workhorse. As you said, they got McKinnon. They have CEH, he's one of my sneaky guys that grabs super late that I think I'm going to be targeting this year.
Mhm.
It's just a feeling. I think he's going to get more play than people are expecting this year.
Yeah.
And my approach with this team, because they are an offense, as you said, Nate, this is an offense that should and probably will score a ton. We'll get a lot of yards in total. It's completely okay still for me to say, take your stabs at whoever you want out of this offense because of where they're being drafted. None of these guys outside of Mahomes and Kelsey are being drafted super high. So you can afford to take your stabs and say, it's going to be Tony. It's going to be MVS if you're a masochist. It's going to be Pacheco. It's going to be McKinnon, CEH, whoever. You can do that and feel comfortable with it. I'd rather do it for this offense than an offense like with the Giants, where it's a similar situation. Two guys, maybe, I guess, Daniel Jones and Darren Waller to a much lesser extent, and then a bunch of gaggle of whoever, and they're being drafted around the same area. I would much rather take this crew than that crew.
I'm glad you said the Giants, because one name that I have heard a ton of people talking about is Richie James with this offense, and how excited the Chiefs are to have him, that he could be the wide receiver 3/4 at season start. So not to say pay attention to Richie James, because I don't want the last thing people said, well, did you hear Nate on with those guys? He said Richie James, move him up. Like I'm an ADP move or anything, but it is something worth noting. Who knows?
And then
flip that out, by the way, and reconfigure it so it sounds exactly
exactly. Chat GPT audio.
Yep.
That's it.
One last question here. Bieniemy, their offensive coordinator, left. Do you have any concerns, with maybe slight regression with this offense, or is it really Andy Reid's offense and he's been the driver this entire time?
Exactly. That's what I think. I think Bieniemy is a very good utilizer of the Andy Reid system. But if you remember, there was plenty of time when, and maybe this is a negative or a positive, depending upon how you flip this, there were some situations where they were upset. Tyreek Hill wasn't thrilled with Bieniemy, because I think Bieniemy went to him and basically said, listen, you're not going to be the focal part of this offense. There is no focal part. It's going to be a uniform, well-run machine, and you're going to have to deal with it. And I think that he wanted out as a result of that. And Matt Nagy could come in and still facilitate the Andy Reid system, which means a more spread out offense. Scary for fantasy, great for Patrick Mahomes, still great for Travis Kelsey.
Yeah. I think we're all in agreement that those two are the ultimate safe plays here for this team. So any last thoughts about your Chiefs here before we wind down?
No, tough schedule. I will say that. It is a beater of a schedule. It'll be a great season, and I hope we can get back to the promised land again.
What's your win prediction for this team, huh? Give us the juice. What do you think?
Oh
16?
Man, 16 wins sounds a little tough. I would say maybe throughout the entire playoffs that would be an ideal. So if that was the case, I'd give them, I'm gonna say 12 and 5. I think that's
You're the only person who can come on and say that about their team and make it seem humble. That 12 wins is humble for a team. That's outrageous.
You're like, oh, look, that is yeah, you like the way I did that? That's great. 12 would be an amazing season for the schedule they have, I think.
Yeah, still first in the division. I mean, I haven't looked too closely at the schedules, but I'm assuming there's so much overlap within the divisions that
there is. Yeah. The AFC is just hard. The AFC is going to be nasty come playoff time again. It always is.
Yeah. All right, Nate. Well, before we sign off here, why don't you tell people what you do, where they can find you, anything you want to plug? Floor is yours.
You can find my work at ihatepigeons.com. That is a new site I just started. Please send all your pigeon hate there. It's a Patreon. So if you send me $3, I will send you back pictures of pigeons that I've flipped off and or not murdered or anything. PETA, I'm not killing pigeons. Don't worry. It's just mostly it's not hate crimes either. What am I trying to say? It is just anger towards. But yeah, so at Nate Markham on Twitter. All my work is over at fantasyandframes.com, where we have so much. I highly encourage anybody, especially if you're in Scott Fishbowl and we have done 120, probably 130 mock drafts compiled into ADP over the last 4 weeks, with excellent contributions. We don't have hardly any auto drafting, so we have live people the entire time. Very sharp people. I would love to have another one and invite both of you guys to join us. Last weekend we had a great one with Bob Harris and Mauricio and some other friends that were all there, and it was it was definitely a challenge. Ryan McDowell came and gave away a Scott Fishbowl invite just on a whim. Just one of the viewers was talking. Awesome. It was so much fun. I extended out to you guys, my fellow pigeon hating friends. But yeah, please check out all their work over at Fantasy and Frames. That's much more important than at Nate Markham. Follow both, but Fantasy and Frames is those guys deserve all the credit in the world. Maybe some of the hardest workers I know.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah. And thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a blast having you on here. Welcome back anytime. To get us out of here, follow my my friend that needs better internet here at Jake Trowbridge. You can find me at FF Dusty Dog. Follow the podcast at Drinking Fantasy. Give us a rate, review, like us, do all that stuff that I tell you to do every single week. And on that note, we'll get out of here and we'll see you next week, folks.
Cheers, FFers.